Salmon is the second most eaten seafood in America, 3.5 pounds per person per year, about 1.5 kilos, and climbing. It passed tuna. It is the weeknight dinner, the thing you order when you are being good. Now the part nobody says out loud. A farmed salmon does not grow up pink. Take one ingredient out of its feed, and that fillet comes out gray. The pink is bought. It is a pigment mixed into the pellet, and somebody picks the shade before the first fish is fed. There is a fan of color swatches for exactly that. 15 plastic strips, numbered 20 to 34, pale pink at one end, deep red at the other, sold by the same chemicals company that sells the pigment. A farmer holds it up like a paint chip against a wall, picks a number, and orders feed to hit it. Bloomberg reported that fish coming out under 23 are difficult to sell at any price. Darker fillets have fetched up to $1 more a pound, roughly $2.20 a kilo. So the color you shopped for was picked off a chart by a stranger, months before that fish was killed. And there are 2 words about it in the case that nobody reads. 7 things in your salmon, counted down. 3 ways to buy the real thing. Those 2 words are number 1. 2 things before the countdown. 1, and you get this once. Astaxanthin, the pigment doing the work, is an approved color additive for salmonid feed in the United States, and everything in this video is permitted. That is the last reassurance you are getting from me. The question was never whether it is permitted, but what you thought you were paying for. 2, the decoder. Because a fish counter is written in code. Atlantic salmon means farmed. Commercial fishing for wild Atlantic salmon is prohibited in the United States, so every Atlantic salmon in an American case was raised in a pen. Color added on the ticket is not a printing error and not a warning. Federal code requires that line when the fish was fed a color additive. Somebody was ordered to write it. Fresh means it was never frozen hard. It says nothing about farmed or wild. And a deep red fillet is not a grade of quality. On farmed salmon, red is a purchase order. 7-1. Number 7. The paint chip for your dinner. The tool is called the Salmon. Hoffmann La Roche built the first version, the Dutch company DSM took it over in 2002, and today it is sold by DSM Firmenich, one of the biggest manufacturers of the pigment itself. The same company sells you the color and the chart you pick it from. It is a fan of plastic strips, exactly like the ones in the paint aisle. 15 shades, 20 at the pale end, 34 at the deep red end. There is a digital version too, a handheld reader that scans a fillet and returns the number. A buyer specifies the number at once on its shelf. The farm feeds until the meat gets there. Bottom line, your salmon had a color code before it had a market weight, and that code is the most expensive line on the feed bill, which is the next one. Number 6. The costliest thing that fish ever ate. Astaxanthin does nothing for the animal's size or how fast it reaches your plate. It is there for your eye. And it runs about 15 to 20% of total feed cost, the single most expensive item in the diet. Around 95% of the astaxanthin used in fish farming is manufactured in a chemical plant. It is not scooped out of krill. The transfer is poor too. Roughly 1/10 of what goes into the pellet ends up in the fillet you buy. Federal code caps it at 80 milligrams per kilogram of finished feed, which the same rule writes a second way, as 72 grams per ton. Bottom line, the priciest ingredient in that animal's life was bought to change what you see, not what you eat. Which raises a question about what else went in for the same reason. Number 5. The other pigment, and the number Europe moved. Astaxanthin is not the only carotenoid cleared for this job. Canthaxanthin does the same work in the same pellet, and it has a history. European scientific committees examined high oral intake of canthaxanthin and found it can leave microcrystal deposits in the human retina. Most of that evidence came from tanning pills, not fish. In January of 2003, the European Commission cut the permitted level in salmonid feed from 80 milligrams per kilogram down to 25. Now open the American code and read the line for canthaxanthin in salmonid feed. 80 milligrams per kilogram of finished feed, 72 grams per ton. The old number, untouched. Europe moved its ceiling. The American ceiling sat still. Bottom line, same fish, same pigment, 2 ceilings, and nothing at that counter tells you which side your dinner was raised on. Number 4. The ocean fish that mostly eats a field. Read what goes into the pellet. Norwegian salmon feed in 2020: 12% fish meal, 10% fish oil, 41% vegetable protein, 20% vegetable oil, and the rest carbohydrate and micro-ingredients. About 7 parts in 10 grew on farmland. In the 1990s, it was close to 9 parts in 10 out of the sea. That swap shows up in the meat. Researchers at Stirling tracked Scottish farmed salmon from 2006 to 2015. A 130-gram portion, about 4.5 ounces, carried 3.5 grams of omega-3 at the start. By the end, 1.5. Bottom line, the health headline that put salmon on your plate lost half its value, while the color held exactly where the chart said. Only one of those two has ever been fought over in an American courtroom. Number 3. The study that started the fight and why it never ended. 2004. The journal Science publishes a survey of roughly 700 farmed and wild salmon, 2 metric tons of fish, about 2 2/10 short tons. Farmed salmon carried higher average levels of PCBs and several other organochlorine compounds. The authors wrote their eating advice off Environmental Protection Agency risk guidance. Critics answered that the levels sat under the Food and Drug Administration tolerance, and that later Alaskan sampling put wild salmon closer to farmed than the paper implied. Both objections are on the record. So is the paper. 20 years on, no settled answer. Bottom line, on the one number people actually fight about, the counter says nothing. On the color, it had to be forced to say 2 words. Number 2. Paying the wild salmon price for the painted fish. Oceana ran DNA tests on salmon bought at restaurants and stores in Chicago, New York, Washington, and Virginia in winter when almost no wild salmon is running. 82 samples. 43% came back mislabeled. 69% of those mislabeled samples were farmed Atlantic salmon sold as wild caught. Restaurants were far worse than stores. 67% of restaurant samples missed, against 20% in groceries. Across the whole project, 466 samples in season and out, the rate landed at 14%. Bottom line, you can order it by name, pay double, and still be handed a fillet whose shade was picked off a fan. Which brings us to the 2 words that were supposed to stop all of this. Number 1. Color added. April 2003. 8 shoppers and a Seattle law firm sue Kroger, Safeway, and Albertsons in King County, Washington for selling farmed salmon as though the color belonged to the fish. Inside a week, all 3 agreed to put color added at the seafood case. California claims were consolidated as the farm-raised salmon cases, and in February of 2008, the state Supreme Court ruled unanimously that federal law did not block them. Shoppers could sue. So the words exist. Federal code requires them when the fish was fed astaxanthin or canthaxanthin. Nobody is technically hiding anything. Now go stand at a fish counter and watch what those 2 words do. They sit on a card behind glass, smallest type on the sign, an inch from the price, about 2.5 centimeters. They do not say the pigment was the costliest thing that fish ate. They do not say a number was picked off a fan. They do not say the fillet would otherwise be gray. 2 words satisfy the law. The law never once asked anybody to explain them. Bottom line, that disclosure was written to end a lawsuit, not to answer your question, and in more than 20 years, nobody has rewritten it. 7 things in your salmon. Here are 3 ways to buy the real thing. 1. Buy by species, not by the word salmon. Sockeye, coho, king, pink, chum, Pacific names. Sockeye has never been farmed commercially, so its red came out of the ocean. Atlantic is the farmed one. Every time. 2. Canned wild Alaska salmon. Pink or sockeye, species and origin printed on the tin. Roughly $4 to $5 a pound, $9 to $11 a kilo. The cheapest, honest fish in the building, and nobody has bothered to color it. 3. Ask 3 questions at the counter. Farmed or wild? Which species, by its name? And where is the color-added card? A counter that answers all 3 is worth your money. A counter that goes quiet on the 3rd one just answered you. Worth your money. And the rule for the glass? 4 seconds. Atlantic means farmed. Color added means somebody picked the shade. And salmon by itself is not an answer. It is a category. Got somebody at home who always grabs the reddest fillet because it looks freshest? Send them this one. Then go look at the color you picked last time and ask who picked it first.